Have the deal of the day, hero of the day, good guy coming up top of the hour. And right now, NRA News commentator Mr. Colion Noir is with us. Colion, how are you, sir?
How's it going, Cam?
It's going very well, man. I appreciate you coming on the program. You have a brand new commentary piece that's already causing consternation in the hearts and minds of precious snowflakes across the nation, Colion.
Yeah, I guess I get to be the bad guy again for today. At least, I guess, in some people's minds. I guess it depends on who you ask, right?
I guess so. Black people can think, too. This is the name of the commentary piece. We're going to debut it right here in just a minute. But let me ask you before we see this, were you? What was your thought going into this commentary?
It was annoyance, for lack of a better word. There's always kind of, for me, been this kind of undertone of like, I want to protect you from yourself, coming from a lot of anti-gun circles. And at best, it's insulting. At worst, it's racist. And for me, I've always thought independently. All of my friends around me are independent thinkers. So to have that kind of chastising or kind of trying to talk me into not being into guns because I'll hurt myself or other people with it because of my race, I just kind of got annoyed with it to the point where I was like, you know what, I need to talk about this.
All right, let's take a look at the brand new commentary from Mr. Colion Noir. Black people can think too.
Telling me I shouldn't own guns because young black men are more likely to die from gun violence is asinine and insulting. You either think I'm too stupid to know that a vast majority of those deaths are drug and gang related, or you're a racist who thinks simply being black and having a gun makes me more prone to violence. This race-baiting rhetoric is a disgusting attempt to take advantage of certain sensitivities. Yes, the inner city's young black men kill each other at an embarrassingly high rate, but instead of addressing the real issue, anti-gun politicians in the mainstream media would rather exploit the symptoms because there's no money in the cure. The vast majority of African Americans are good law-abiding people, and many of them own guns. Yet the media keeps trying to tell me that the majority of black people are anti-gun. So I guess that poll conducted by the Pew Research Center that found that 54% of black people believe guns protect you from being a crime victim was just the Illuminati. The image of black gun ownership has been hijacked and vilified by an anti-gun mainstream media, the same way they vilified the Cubans, the Italians, the Irish, and the Mexicans. They project and glorify this D-boy gangbanging image as if African Americans are nothing more than that. This creates an insidious form of bigotry and stereotyping that only further divides this country along racial lines. Come to think of it, it's borderline genius. By blaming the gun, the corrupt media can advance their agenda and look like they give a damn about the inner city, then cue up racial opportunists like Al Sharpton who ignore the systemic degradation of the black family, drugs dumped into the community, an education system you couldn't pay the rest of America to put their kids in, and government programs like welfare that incentivize joblessness, further perpetuating generations of poverty. Instead, he and his dark and lovely perm will continue pointing the finger at the whites will point the finger back at him, and the moderator will keep asking racially inflammatory questions, and the mainstream media sits back and rakes in the dough with their modern-day minstrel show they call journalism. Think about it. The same liberal mainstream media that claims to want to end gun violence in the inner city is the same liberal-minded Hollywood production companies and major record labels that glorify and perpetuate the drug-dealing, gang-banging black man with a gun stereotype. If we really want to solve these problems, we have to understand that it will involve changing generations, not simply election cycle statistics. It will be uncomfortable. It'll challenge our current idea of meritocracy. We must be willing to get rid of our egos. We'll have to embrace personal accountability. We'll have to sacrifice political correctness for honest debate. If we're not ready to do any of these things, nothing will change other than the bank accounts of the mainstream media elites, and we'll watch this country implode on itself because it was easier to blame the gun instead of putting in hard work to address the real issue.
Mr. Colion Noir, his brand new commentary piece, Black People Can Think Too. All right, Colion, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, you know, you talk about all the things it's going to take to change the inner city. That's hard, man. It's so much easier just to have a soundbite solution and say we need another round of gun control laws. And then when that doesn't work, we'll just say, well, we need another round of gun control laws. And we'll just keep doing that. That's much easier from a politician's perspective, right?
Absolutely. It's like, for instance, I just got back from the dentist today, and he told me I have to have my wisdom teeth pulled. I don't want to have my wisdom tooth pulled. I think it's better to just deal with it whenever it starts to hurt. I'll pop some pain medication, wait till it goes away, and then deal with it again when it comes back. Because it's a lot harder to go into the doctor's office and then get it pulled. I could do that and then completely solve the problem. But I don't want to because it's easier to just treat the symptoms.
You know, the other aspect of this, we've been talking about this in terms of Chicago and the violence that we've seen there and Baltimore. Baltimore, Maryland, Annapolis passed the Firearm Safety Act of 2013. Violence has been up in Baltimore ever since. You can look at, I think, murders up in Hartford, Connecticut since they passed their gun laws in 2013. We've talked about the increase in violence in New York City after the passage of the SAFE Act. Not only is it insulting to the people, the good people who live in these bad neighborhoods, Colion, it's completely ineffective at making their lives better. Gun control, as you say, they go after these gun control laws prohibit and make it very dangerous for good people in bad neighborhoods to exercise their Second Amendment rights, but the criminals are left untouched by these laws.
Well, what they're depending on are people not to look below the surface of these proposed laws and legislation that are basically essentially more gun control. They expect people not to look below it and see that, wait a minute, if you create these laws, they're not going to do anything to affect the people who don't want to obey them to begin with. So then what the politician is allowed to do is to walk away and say, you know what, I did something. I implemented this law, stronger background checks, more gun control laws. And then they can sit on top of that and run for their next office, where the people who are living in these environments find themselves in an even worse position. Now they're sitting there trying to debate whether or not they want to carry a gun that they know is illegal to do, but they live in a neighborhood where they're more likely to have to use that gun than, say, someone like me who lives in Texas where we have more liberal gun laws. But see, they don't think about those things. They're just worried about looking good for the camera, saying and spitting out whatever they want to spit out for the moment and then go about their way, while the people who live in these environments have to deal with the consequences.
Absolutely. I keep thinking about my own son, Colion, as I was watching your piece, because my son's biracial. My oldest son, 23 years old. Mm-hmm. He was raised in Camden, New Jersey until he was about 6. And I often think about how different his life might have turned out had he stayed in Camden, which was a very violent city at the time, has remained a very violent city. He would not have been exposed to responsible gun ownership. You know, there are no ranges in Camden. Yeah. There's not. I don't even know if the JROTC is operating in Camden, New Jersey. There are a lot of people who are in illegal possession of firearms doing very bad things with them. There's not a culture of responsible gun ownership. Meanwhile, my son has grown up to be responsible and safe around firearms. He likes shooting. He's not a competitive shooter, but he likes plinking with his friends. And I don't want him to ever feel like because he is because the world would see him as a young black man, that this is an activity that he has to forego because that's not something that young black men do in this country.
And it's unfortunate that we even have to have that conversation, because what has also happened is the image of being a young black man who is a gun owner, as I said in the video, it's been hijacked. Mm-hmm. It's been perpetuated. It's this idea that if you're young and you're black and you have a gun, you're probably engaged in some type of in a lifestyle that is based around the criminal element. And a lot of the friends that I know that are black, all the people that I know that are black, majority of them, vast majority of them, they're regular people. They do regular things. They're not thugs. They're not drug dealers. They don't do any of those things. But yet, a lot of them own guns, and they own them responsibly. But for the vast majority of people who only encounter black people by way of, say, what they see in the media, this is the perception that they're encountering. They're seeing what we glorify in the media through our music, through the TV shows we watch, through our movies, and it's unfortunate because people take that and bring it into real world and then assume that to be the case, and then it's only further reinforced by these liberal-minded anti-gunners, more or less, who want to tell me, you know what? Look at how many people who look like you are dying because of guns. How could you possibly be pro-gun? Well, because I'm not doing those things. Like, I'm not going to be held accountable for somebody else's actions, especially when it comes to defending myself.
Well, and this is where we get to, what really works. You know, if gun control is not the answer, if passing laws that are going to make it prohibitively expensive, for instance, for somebody who lives in a bad neighborhood in Chicago to get a concealed carry license, going to make it, very difficult for them to get the training because you're not going to offer it in the city. You got to have 16 hours of training. You got to go to a range that, again, is not located in the city of Chicago. That's going to deny some people of their right to keep and bear arms. And it's not going to do a damn thing to reduce violent crime in the city of Chicago. But we do know that most violent crime is committed by a small number of individuals, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so, the idea that we're going to pass these blanket gun control laws and we're going to expect the criminals to obey them, when what we're seeing around the country is that violence in Richmond, California, I've been talking about this the past couple of days, homicide's been cut in half over the last 5 years. They figured out 17 individuals were responsible for more than 70% of the shootings in their city. 17.
A lot of people don't realize when they talk to me about these gun control issues, and they bring up the gun violence in our country, and then when I tell them how small of a percentage of the various cities that are responsible for a vast majority of those gun deaths, it blows their mind because they're thinking it's pervasive across the country, like it's evenly spread like a blanket, when it's not. These are very concentrated areas that are making up a vast majority of these gun deaths. But a lot of people don't realize that. And it really honestly takes looking at situations like Southside Chicago, for instance. You take Southside Chicago and then you compare it to a neighboring state that doesn't have the strict form of gun control that Chicago has. They're not dealing with that violence, but yet Southside Chicago is. So if we account for the constant in those situations, which is the gun, at that point it leads to reason. The gun isn't the issue. Because when you have guns over here and they're not killing each other like crazy, but then you have guns over here and they're killing each other like crazy, there's a deeper issue that needs to be addressed, a harder issue. And it's more complex than simply, get rid of the guns.
It is. It's a hell of a lot more complex than that. And this is what concerns me, though, Colion, because it seems like we live in somewhat simplistic times, right? The soundbite solution. You gotta be able to save the world in 140 characters or less, Colion.
That's why I tweet like 100 times after the fact.
But I do worry that politicians are going to be able to continue to get by on this. And I really hope that the voices like yours can raise some awareness. We can actually start to have that real discussion, that real debate about the many things that are going to happen if we are going to continue, if not just to see violent crime drop in these bad neighborhoods, but again to see these bad neighborhoods become good.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think a lot of that has to do with being able to change perspectives on both sides, whether it be black, white, Spanish, Asian, what have you. The problem is that we've also, as simple as these times are, we're still living in a very politically correct time. And I'm not all for just insulting people for the sake of insulting people, but we've got to have a certain level of fearlessness where not that we don't care about offending someone, but be able to have an honest enough conversation with people who aren't like us and people we don't usually interact with on a daily basis, to have a conversation where, you know what, I might say something that might offend you. And it's coming from the best place possible because I'm trying to understand. And then from there, that dialogue allows us to generate a perspective about each other that's real. And then with that reality, we can take that and begin the process of improving the country as a whole. We're all different, but we're all the same in that we're all Americans and we're all living in this country. We should embrace each other's differences while at the same time standing together in unison as a country. But the only way we can do that is if we're honest with each other and have honest dialogue about the issues in this country. But right now what's happening is it's being dominated by a mainstream media that wants to play each side up against the other side, and then we're yelling and throwing things at each other, and nothing is really happening. And they're taking the extremes from both of those sides, and it's just turning into a fight. And personally, if we want to actually fix those issues, we can't as long as we continue to do that, or as long as we continue to defer to the mainstream media for our source of information. We're just intellectually lazy, and I'm including myself in that as well, because I have to stay on top of myself to keep informed about everything as much as possible about what's going on. But as long as we tend to revel in that level of lazy intellect, we're going to continue to have these problems.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think there's again, there's a lot to unpack there. But listen, I hope that you and I can keep having these conversations. You don't have to worry about offending me.
Well, you know I don't shut up.
Listen, we always love having you on. Make sure that you check out Colion's new video again at NRANews.com. And listen, come back soon, will you?
Will do. Thanks,
all right, man. We'll talk soon. Colion Noir, NRA News commentator with us, talking about his new piece, Black People Can Think Too.